Next matchup I have for you, it is going to be Rams at the Saints, 1 o'clock Eastern kickoff on Sunday. New Orleans is -4, totals 38.5. Now the Saints lost 4, let's try that again. The Saints lost 7 out of their last 9, and they successfully covered the number only twice during that span. Now the Saints defense is also allowing 25 points a game, and they have a pretty tough time slowing down the run. They're facing a Rams club who covered in 2 out of their last 4 themselves, covers against the likes of Tampa Bay and Carolina. When it comes to defensive play, these guys have done a real nice job stopping the run themselves. They're actually limiting their opponents to just 96 yards a game on the ground. Of course, Bobby Wagner, he's the team leader in tackles with 73 of them. Meanwhile, Aaron Donald, he's got 5 sacks and 8 tackles for loss. And of course, he gets double teamed. You really got a game plan around him. He's very disruptive. Now, injury-wise, Stafford, Howard, and Gaines are questionable. Meanwhile, for New Orleans, Hurst, Pete, Lattimore, May, Davenport, McCoy, Callaway, and Werner, they're all listed as questionable for them. When it comes to the total, New Orleans saw their last 3 straight stay under the number. Meanwhile, LA's gone 67% to the under for the whole year themselves. I'm going to lean toward the Rams +4, keeping this one close, under 38.5. Next matchup, Jets at the Patriots, 1 o'clock Foxborough. New England is -3.5 at Gillette Stadium, totals 39. And even though the Pats have turned it on here, they're one of the worst passing teams in the AFC. They're actually in the bottom 10 in the entire league in passing yards per game. And no real surprise here, guys. The Pats are also in the bottom 10 in total yards per contest. Now they're facing a tough New York defense who's giving up just 19 points a game. Quinnen Williams has 7 sacks and 33 tackles. Meanwhile, C.J. Mosley's got a team-best 88 tackles on the year himself. New York's won 6 out of their last 8, and they covered the number in 75% of those contests I just mentioned. Now, injury-wise, Rankins and Davis are questionable for New York. Meanwhile, for the Pats, Cannon, Parker, Andrews, Harris, and Barmore, they're all listed as questionable for New England. When it comes to the weather report, cold and breezy by kickoff, 41 degrees and 12-mile-an-hour winds by 1 o'clock up there in New England. When it comes to the total, New England saw 3 out of their last 5 stay under the line. Meanwhile, New York went 4-1 to the under in their last 5 themselves. I'm going to lean toward the New York Jets +3.5, under 39. Next ball game, it is going to be Bears at the Falcons, 1 o'clock Eastern start time. Atlanta's -3 in the Dome, totals 50. And even though the Falcons failed to cover in their last 4 straight, they should be able to run all over the Bears. They're in the top 5 in rush yards per game. And for as bad as they look, the Falcons are scoring nearly 24 points per contest. Now they're facing a Bears defense on the other side who does a terrible job at stopping the run themselves. They're allowing nearly 150 yards a game on the ground. They're also giving up 25 points a game, and they've gotten only 1 win since September 25th. Now, injury-wise, Muhammad, Vildor, and Jenkins are questionable. Meanwhile, for Atlanta, Harris and Terrell are questionable for them. When it comes to the total, the Falcons saw overs against the likes of Carolina, Cincinnati, and Seattle. Meanwhile, Chicago saw their last 4 straight get over the total themselves. I'm going to lean toward the Atlanta Falcons -3, over 50. Next contest, it is going to be Panthers at the Ravens, 1 o'clock Eastern kickoff. Baltimore's the 12-point favorite at home, totals 44. Now, the Ravens won their last 3 straight, and they're one of the best running teams in the game right now. They're gaining 168 yards per contest on the ground, and they're also scoring over 26 points a game. Now they're facing a Carolina squad who's got one of the worst rush defenses in the NFC. These guys are currently in the bottom 10 in the entire league in stopping the run. And when it comes to offensive production, the Panthers have had all kinds of problem moving the sticks. They're in the bottom 3 in total yards per game. Now, injury-wise, Burris, Higgins, Ioannidis, and Chin, they're all listed as questionable. Meanwhile, for Baltimore, Gus Edwards is questionable with a hammy. When it comes to the weather, windy and cold in the Inner Harbor, on Sunday, 42 degrees and 15-mile-an-hour winds by kickoff. When it comes to the total, Baltimore saw overs against the likes of Tampa Bay, New England, and Miami. Meanwhile, Carolina saw 2 out of their last 3 get over the total themselves. I'm going to lean toward Baltimore minus 12 over 44. Next ball game, it is going to be Commanders at the Texans, 1 o'clock Eastern start time. Washington's minus 3 on the road, totals 40. Now, the Commanders won 4 out of their last 5, and they successfully covered the point spread in all 5 of those games. They're also playing pretty tough on defense. They're in the top 10 in the league in fewest yards allowed. Cole Holcomb leads the D with 69 tackles. Meanwhile, Deron Payne and Jonathan Allen, they've combined for double-digit sacks between the two of them. Now they're facing a one-win Houston team who scores only 16 points a game, and they rank in the bottom 5 in total yards. When it comes to the injury report, Neville Hewitt's questionable with a hammy. Meanwhile, for Washington, Mayo, McKissick, Williams, and Holcomb, they're all banged up a little bit right now for them, so keep an eye on their statuses. Now, when it comes to the total, Washington went 6-2 to the under in their last 8. Meanwhile, Houston saw unders against the likes of the Giants, Titans, and Jaguars. I'm going to lean toward Washington minus 3, under 40. Next ball game, it is going to be Browns at the Bills, 1 o'clock Eastern start time. Now, Buffalo's the 8-point favorite in upstate New York, totals 44. And even though the Bills lost their last 2 straight, they're still gaining more yards a game than any other team in the league. Josh Allen's throwing for over 300 yards a game and 20 touchdowns. Meanwhile, wideout Stephon Diggs, he's getting nearly 110 yards a game receiving. They're facing a Cleveland defense who allows over 26 points a game themselves, and they rank in the bottom 3 in points allowed. They're also one of the worst defensive rushing teams in the AFC. Injury-wise, Dunn is questionable. Owusu-Koramoah is also questionable for Cleveland. And it does look like the Brownies are going to go ahead and go with Deshaun Watson as the starter. I'm sure he'll get a warm reception in Buffalo. Now, as far as the Bills are concerned with this injury report, Poyer, Kumaro, White, Edmonds, Rousseau, and Elam, they're all listed as questionable for them. Now, weather-wise, cold and blustery on Sunday in upstate New York. It's going to be 28 degrees along with 20-mile-an-hour winds in Buffalo. So if you're betting that game, be prepared. I'll tell you this much. When it comes to the total, I wouldn't be surprised if the offenses get slowed down a bit from the wind. I'm sure that's going to greatly impact 3rd and 4th down decisions. We did also see 2 out of Cleveland's last 3 ball games stay under the number. Now, Buffalo's 7-2 to the under for the entire year themselves. I'm going to lean toward Buffalo minus 8, under 44. Next contest, it is going to be Eagles. Wow. That is some regional accent there. Wow. Eagles, Colts, 1 o'clock East. Philadelphia's minus 6.5, totals 44 and a hook. And despite Philly's roadblock on Monday, I meant to say dialect. That's regional dialect. Eagles. But anyway, despite Philly's roadblock on Monday, they should be able to cover this number on the road. They're scoring over 27 points a game, and they're in the top 5 in total yards. Now, defensively, not many teams are defending the pass better than this Eagles secondary. C.J. Gardner-Johnson leads the NFL with 6 interceptions. Meanwhile, James Bradbury's 4th in the league in PDs with 11 of them. And, of course, PDs, those are passes defensed, pass deflections. Pretty much the same thing. PBU, pass breakup. Anyway, they're facing a Colts offense who's scoring only 15 points a game, and they have a tough time moving the football. They're in the bottom 10 in the league in total yards per game. Now, injury-wise, Woods, Jackson, and Pay are questionable for Indy. Meanwhile, for Philadelphia, Opeta, Sermon, and Sills are questionable. Goddard is out. When it comes to the total, Philly saw unders against the likes of Arizona, Washington, and Minnesota. Meanwhile, Indy's gone 80% to the under for the entire year themselves. I'm leaning toward Philadelphia minus 6.5, under 44 and a hook. And with that, guys, we're going to jump into our next and final matchup for part one. It is going to be Lions at the Giants, 1 o'clock Eastern start time. New York's minus 3 on their home field, totals 46. Now, the Giants should run it down their throats. They're in the top 3 in rushing offense, and the Lions are allowing over 160 yards a game on the ground. Now, Saquon, he's gaining over 100 yards a game rushing, and he scored 6 times. They're facing a Detroit squad who allows more points a game than any other team in the league. And if that ain't bad enough, Detroit's giving up more total yards a game than any other franchise in the NFL as well. Now, injury-wise, Brockers, Reynolds, Elliott, Benson, Nelson, Melifonwu, Lucas, and Rodriguez, they're all listed as questionable for Detroit. When it comes to the weather, crisp and windy on Sunday in East Rutherford. It'll be 41 degrees and 16-mile-an-hour winds by 1 o'clock. When it comes to the scoring, New York saw every one of their games this year fall under the number except for one. Meanwhile, Detroit saw 3 out of their last 5 stay under the line themselves. I'm going to lean toward the New York Football Giants minus 3, under 46.